Hi everyone, thank you for coming to this webinar with Hockey All In. Really happy that we've got Azeem Rafiq and Sanjay Bhandari with us today. But before we kick off with any questions and going through today's agenda, I just wanted to start with reminding everybody about All In, what it is, why it kind of came about and what our sort of goals are. So I'm just going to share my screen again a second. Okay, so All In, what does it mean? So essentially, it means there isn't an approach of dipping your toes in when it comes to tackling inequality in hockey or sport or wider society. You have to ask yourself, if you're committed to fighting inequality in hockey or anywhere else, what have you done to diminish the structure of inequality? You either commit to it, or by doing nothing, you're actually reaffirming it. And All In's 3 A's are acknowledge, assess, and act. Now, this can apply to you as an individual, a club, a region, or a governing body. If you see inequality, call it out, acknowledge it, assess what the problem is and what can be done to help towards solving it, and then act on it. And in terms of what we're looking for in terms of a vision for a more inclusive and diverse future, we'd like to see an actively promoted national strategy for promoting sport within state schools, an active education programme for regions, clubs, umpires and players on ED&I on the same scale as safeguarding, national coaches to engage and mentor clubs from more deprived towns and inner city areas. And we'd like to see the EH Board of Directors matching the demographics of society by 2023, and the GB 2028 Olympic squad to match the demographics of British society as well. And by 2028, we want to see at least 50% of the squad coming from state schools, and also to see the national coaching set up to match the demographics of society as well. So how can you get involved? You can get your club to sign up to the All In mission. Follow us on Twitter at Hockey All In 1. Join our WhatsApp group conversation by signing up at our website, and write to your local region and EH, encouraging them to sign up as well, and then socialise the vision and share the logo across social media. And this is what we're trying to really prevent here. People in sport running different races effectively, whether it be based on gender, disability, race, or socio-economic group. So that's a little bit about All In and what we're trying to achieve. So as I said, we've got 2 great guests today who probably don't need much of an introduction. Azeem Rafiq, who's a former pro cricketer who's been in the news quite a lot of late around his complaint to Yorkshire Cricket Club and their mishandling of a race complaint. And then we've got Sanjay Bhandari as well, who's the chair of Kick It Out. And you'd probably see their branding up and down the country at football matches, as well as quite a lot on Sky Sports. And I just want to start by asking you, Azeem, how you doing? How's everything been? Because I know there's been a lot going on.
Hi, mate. Yeah, no, look, things are trying to spend a lot of energy on the positive solutions. Trying to educate myself, as well as helping the institutions and some of the organisations that I've been working with understand how things could have been handled a little bit better, and how that first point of the complaint, if York should have handled things differently, where we could have been. So yeah, no, all good, mate. Good to see you again.
So, I mean, just on that complaint, because I think this is quite important for people in the hockey world to understand as well. How would you have liked to have seen it handled initially? Which would have been better? Would it have been just acknowledgement, or would it have been obviously going through the investigation more thoroughly?
Well, I mean, when I first raised it in 2018, while I was still at the club, I think all it would have taken us just a few answers as to why certain things happened the way it did, and why certain leaders took the decision that they did. And I think from there on, it would have been more a commitment how things were going to be different to make sure that Yorkshire County Cricket Club, which has a massive, diverse community, actually reflected its the community that it was serving, and that's all it would have taken when I first raised it in 2018. But even in 2020, when I spoke out publicly, I never expected it to go further than a phone call, sit in a room, few answers, so I could put my sort of jigsaw back together as to why things happened the way they did, and again, an understanding as to what things are going to be different to make sure it doesn't happen again.
Sanjay, you've seen some of the stats that we've just put up there for Hockey All In and what we want to see. What are your numbers in terms of, your thoughts in terms of quotas and goals when it comes to things like this? Because there's a lot of people who don't like to see that. They say that you should just let the process run its course. You're on mute, mate.
Sorry, if you let the process, that was schoolboy error, that wasn't it?
Number of webinars you go on.
I know my excuse has been it's been a really long week. Look, if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always got. So the part of the problem with just leaving things as they are, or trusting that things will work out because you've got a different intention, history says that doesn't work. Partly it's based on this myth that just because we want to live in a meritocratic society doesn't mean that we do. Doesn't mean that decisions are made on a purely meritocratic basis. They're not. Decisions are made by human beings, and human beings have biases and subconscious things that impact their decision making. So you never really change anything in any organization, in any industry, unless you have targets. That it just doesn't happen. And so you have to have, I think, some degree of targeting. Now, you could argue about the difference between quotas and targets, and generally speaking, in my experience in other industries, is quotas rarely work for anyone from a role perspective, and you have to distinguish between roles and interviews, right? So from a role perspective, quotas rarely work and targets are nearly always better, because the implicit thing about targets is you might not hit your targets. And as long as you have a sort of comply or explain approach to the targets, i.e. you either comply with the target or you explain why there's a real difficulty, why you can't reach it, and what you're going to do to try and reach your target, those can be effective. And I've seen those be effective in other industries, and I've used them myself in other industries. And it's what we're doing in football with the Football Leadership Diversity Code. I think the one place where generally quotas tend to be, you have to hit this number. That's it. It's a mandate. And where quotas tend not to be very effective for people from a you've got to have this many people in this role, because actually it's also demeaning if you're the recipient of that. People think you're only in there to fill a quota. But where we've seen quotas can be effective is in things like interviews. Because you're not going to get to your target of the number of roles unless you're interviewing people. And so things like the Rooney Rule in the US, where you've got a mandatory quota, you must interview at least one coach of color for an NFL coaching job. What that means is you get exposed to more people, and you're forced to be exposed to more people, and that has actually had the effect of increasing the diversity of the coaching workforce in the NFL. So I think it's about what are you going to use the numbers for, and there's a difference between quotas and targets, and you might use them focused on different parts of the sort of supply chain, if you like. There's quite a long way before you actually get someone in a role. But I think the bottom answer is, the bottom line is, I don't think you can do anything without targets. I don't think any organisation shifts unless they have targets. So you have to measure people on them and cascade those targets through the organisation. Then, funnily enough, people start achieving their targets.
I mean, would you say that asking for the demographics of like a hockey team to a GB hockey team, for example, to match society be an outlandish target?
So that depends. So there's setting a target. The principle of having a target is really important. Actually, there's a bit of art and a bit of science in my experience in setting a target. So, for instance, if you're there are factors that need to go in, which is, what does society look like? What's your pool of available talent that you're selecting from is not necessarily the whole of society. It might be, it's the people who play the game, or in any organisation, the people who are in that industry. So what does that look like? What does your organisation look like? And therefore, how far away are you? So and then setting that target it's such a number that it's difficult but achievable. Because if you set it that's really outlandish, all that happens is everyone ignores the target, and you just go, well, you set me up to fail in the first place. I'm just going to ignore that. I can't possibly achieve that. So an example, one of the things we did in one of our organisations, we were 3% of our partners were Black, Asian, dual heritage. We said within 5 years, we want to get to 10%, but the way we will do that is on a rolling 3-year basis. 10% must be from Black, Asian or dual heritage background. And so by doing that rolling 3-year target, we got from 3 to 10 in 5 years. And so you have to do some of the maths as well to figure out, is it actually doable? Can you do that with, when you do that, set the target at a stretchy place. So I couldn't tell you whether what you've set out as a target is something that's achievable, but what it should do is force people to say, right, well, where are we now? Where's the pool? How are we going to get a talent? It forces someone to come back to you and say, that's maybe not a realistic target, but this is a realistic target. And then these are the actions we're going to do to make sure we hit that target.
Azeem, is this something that you've seen in cricket at all, setting targets when it comes to the demographics of say, the England cricket team, or even in at board level?
I think we've recently seen, well, after DCMS, one of the 12-point action plans was getting representation on boards, 30%. So, I think it's important to have targets, but I'm more interested in how it's going to happen, because especially on these action plans and documents, it ends up being, oh, look, we're going to do this, but there don't seem to be a route as to how we're going to do it. I've not seen it yet within cricket anywhere, and Sanjay's right with it's like putting that rolling. Where's it now? Where's it going to look like? How are we going to get there? And that's what I think that's really important, as so to start getting the organisations to actually switch from just targets to how we're going to get to them targets, and as well help each other. So it's coming from the top to the ECB to the counties. Every county is in a little bit of a different position, so they all need that little bit of a different sort of support to get there. Some have a lack of resources, some have people that have been there, and that pressure to move quickly is making them sort of back off a little bit, and that's what it feels like. So it's getting that balance right is very important as well.
You're on mute.
How have you both found? Sorry, the kids walked in a second ago. How have you both found the balance between supporting and challenging your respective governing bodies, for example, football or cricket? Azeem, do you want to start with yourself?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think it's been it's a lot easier for me because I'm not really I've been clear from the offset that anyone that is showing even a willingness to do things in a different way and accepting things have not been right, I will support 100%. And then sort of challenging is, I think that because I'm not on the inside, and that's why I've tried to keep myself not on the inside. It's a very simple thing for me. If I don't feel like things have been done properly, there's nothing that I need to protect or I need to worry about, because quite frankly, I'm not part of the system. And that is one of the reasons when different things have been sort of hinted or offered to me, I've tried to stay away from, because there's a lot of people, a lot of good people that are happy to work on the inside, but a lot of people struggle to sort of challenge continuously from the outside. Obviously, hopefully at some point that will change for me, that I can play a bit more of a part, because I feel like I got the bravery or the courage to be able to sit in there and challenge as well. So it's a lot, I feel like it's a lot simpler for me, but it's really important, without waffling on, that we do, when there is an intention, that we do show that support, because that support could help accelerate the change.
I mean, Sanjay, would you say that Kick It Out came about more as a challenge organisation or as a support organisation initially?
Yeah, I mean, I'm really glad you're using that language, because it's kind of the language I've been trying to use and trying to create that framing of support and challenge in defining what we do, right? And so I'd say that historically, the way the organisation was set up, obviously it was set up in 1993, a long time ago, 30 years ago nearly, and was set up in order to challenge discrimination primarily suffered by players. And of course, things have moved on in many ways. Some things haven't moved on so much, but things have moved on in terms of react across all different areas of underrepresented or minority communities, and around promoting inclusion as well as tackling discrimination. I think because of, I suppose this came out of our governance and strategy review that I did for Kick It Out, and think about what's our place in the world and what role should we take, and which started as very much, I suppose, an activist organisation challenging, but an activist organisation still funded by, Premier League, PFA, and historically then the FA, EFL, right? And then some challenges, I think, emerged about, well, are you too close? Are you in the pocket? You're funded, and so are you going to be sufficiently challenging? And so the way I've sort of looked at it is I've changed some of the governance of our organisation so that some of the preferential rights of the funders have gone. All the preferential rights of the funds have gone, which meant that I was able to get that external funding. So now we have Sky basically matches pound for pound and more what the funding we get from Inside Football. So actually, I'm more in hock to Sky than I am to the football authorities, but that's deliberate because I don't want to be in hock to anyone. We're not anyone's spokesperson, and we've said to Sky and we've said to football, when we need to challenge you and when we need to call out behaviour, we will do. So when the chair of the FA made his comments to the select committee, I was the first person to call in question whether he should be enrolled and he should be looking to resign, and I did that within 2 hours. I think it's how you define support and challenge. The reason why I focus on both is because it's quite easy to focus on the challenge bit, and actually everyone kind of expects us to do that. And actually, in a way, it's kind of maybe it's part of the problem is also social media, because it creates this auction for public outrage that as soon as something happens, there's almost a race who can be the first to condemn it. And I'm kind of going, well, great, but what good does condemnation do? How does that create a solution? So the support bit I'm interested in is not patting authorities on the back, it's finding solutions. And actually part of when I'm challenging the organisations is, we've come up with this solution, here's the approach. Why aren't you adopting it? What's wrong with it? Kick the tires on it. Tell me what's wrong with it. Why aren't you adopting it? And so the two actually become very, very connected. Principally, I want us to be involved in solutions. That's what I want us to be known for, because anyone can identify the problems. That's easy. The really difficult bit is creating answers. And I think that's the kind of thing I would like us to be famous for.
I think when it comes to the whole notion of finding answers and finding solutions, that's fine. But I think a lot of people and Azeem, you might find this as well, that once you're starting to work with the governing body, that you might get people who say, right, you're working with them now, so don't rustle any more feathers, don't upset any more people, because you're kind of there and you're supporting them and you're helping them out. And by having any more stories come out, for example, it might take the governing body backwards again. I mean, how do you both deal with that? Azeem, do you want to start with that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure there's many left that I haven't upset, so that makes it a bit easier as well. Leadership is really important through all of this. I think leadership is key, because I think if the organisation is actually genuinely wanted to do things differently, transparent, and all the buzzwords that you hear, I think they should be able to listen to things that are not quite right, and having that dialogue or being challenged by someone who has a different view to you, and actually doing that well. I think it's a good. Well, I feel like that would be a good start, because from a cricket point of view, if someone comes out tomorrow and speaks out in the way I did, I would hope and expect that cricket would handle it in a completely different manner, because then that to me is having learned from the situation, but also that genuinely deep down they have wanted to listen and become a little bit more transparent and wanting to hear it from a different point of view. Well, I'm not sure they've got to that at this stage, but I think just wanting to and willing to, like I think Sanjay mentioned it at the start, just because you've got the right intention to do it doesn't mean that you are going to do it right. But it's stuff like when someone first raises an allegation into an organisation that's never had an allegation before, that straight away the first intentions to go into like the defensive mode, like a risk management type strategy. I think if that changes from actually just dealing with the human, that will show where the organisation is. And if someone does, or if I do end up going and being part of the system, I think one thing I would make it very clear right from the offset is they'd have to have me in as I am, because people who've got to know me would say that actually my intentions are to just make things better. I'm not, but if there is things that are just people are banging the drum down and not being listened to, then it needs to be, social media needs to be used, and I will use it because that is our voice. So yeah, I think it's a fine balance, but me personally, I don't think I'd find it difficult. But obviously, as organizations and institutions, they have to go through, they're part of a larger sort of group of people that make the decision. And it's at that point you have a decision to make as an individual. So yeah, I mean, I'll leave it to Sanjay. I think
I actually think you might think it's harder for me. I actually think it's easier, right? It may have been harder at the start. It's much easier now. And part of that is because one of the first things I did with our board of trustees was said, I'm just going to remind you, it's helpful for me because I'm a lawyer. So I said, look, we're a charity. That means we have charitable objects. That means as a group of trustees, your obligation is to your beneficiaries. Who are your beneficiaries? Let's write that down. Let's commit to identifying who our beneficiaries are. And so we came through that and said our beneficiaries are underrepresented or minority communities in football. That will extend to sport as we go into other sports. And the reason why that's important is because that becomes our North Star. In any situation, we say, how do we best serve their interests? So sometimes that will be calling out. Sometimes that will be working with behind the scenes to ensure things, that there's a dialogue and there's a change. And sometimes it'll be both, because sometimes it'll be, well, I'll start that conversation, but look, if it doesn't work, I'm going to go and use the pulpit that we've got because you're not listening. We haven't got the acceptance yet. And so we use both of those. We use the different tools that we have at our disposal. But the focus is what's going to best serve our beneficiaries. That's what our job is. I'm not here for me. I'm not here for, we're not here to serve general political purposes. We're here to serve our beneficiaries and to make life better for our beneficiaries. So what's going to have the best result for them? And I think in a way makes it a lot easier for me and a lot easier for my team, because they all know now know that that's what I'm going to expect of them. is what best serves the beneficiaries. So as an example, you know, quite often if we have got relationships with the clubs, with authorities and so on, if an incident happens, first of all, we'll actually ask them to find out. We want to work on facts and evidence. So what did happen? You know, because I'll ignore the noise on Twitter because that may not be what's actually happened. We'll go and try and find out. Once we've found out, we might make a statement, we might not. But actually, if we are making one, what we might do is say to the club, here's our statement. What, you know, this is, tell us if there's anything in here that's factually incorrect, and we'll give you a heads up so that you can see what we're saying. But we're not going to change it. This is what we're saying. But as a courtesy, because we work with you, if there's something in here that you don't like, you're at least ready to respond to it. And so I can best manage that relationship. And I would do that with the FA, with the Premier League, with clubs. But there might come a moment when I'm not going to do that. So when Greg Clark said what he said as the chair of the FA in front of DCMS, we issued our statement without talking to the FA, but separately I sent a note to the CEO saying, look, normally I would run things by you. This is too important. I'm not going to run anything by you. I've put it out there. And actually he said, you know what, if I were you, I'd probably done the same thing. So, you know, we still have a decent relationship. But that to me is how I'm serving my beneficiaries. I'm saying the right thing. I'm doing the right thing for beneficiaries. But it's also important that we continue to have that relationship, because when we're in the room, we can drive change.
Yeah, I think that's important, and I think this is something we've spoken about before as well, from both a football and a cricket perspective, that there's a fine balance as well, that you don't want to get caught up and become a shield for that governing body as well. And they'll say, oh, well, look, we're working with Kick It Out, so that means everything's okay. Or I'm working with Azeem Rafiq, so, you know, we understand all the issues that are there. I mean, how have you guys managed that?
I mean, from a cricket, I mean, I saw that a lot of that. It's one of my biggest, whenever any organization, to be honest, I'm normally the type of, I'd go on the trusting side first generally in life. But when it comes to organizations like this, I honestly, until I'm proven otherwise, I will always see it, because I saw it for 2 years, the amount of organizations that wanted to, in nicest way I can put it, go and be part of protection for the institutions, just so they could benefit, because quite frankly, they thought the system would always win. And even, I see it even now, some very big organizations, included right at the top, were contacted to try and support me and didn't want to get involved. Even the PCA, and they've admitted it themselves. So it's one of the things that I find the most challenging out of this space, is working out which organization actually is there for the people, and which is there to serve their own purpose, or sort of get their own funding. It's a really challenging thing, and I just hope and wish as we move forward, whether it's throughout sort of like a Sport England, or someone can guide some of these clubs, because I know a lot of counties have had so many organisations that have emailed them, and they feel like they're stuck, right? If they respond and they don't work with them, they get shouted at, and the tone of the emails change. And if they do, they don't know what they're working with. They're just trying to get some PR out of it. So it's a really tough space, and I think it's one of the biggest reasons why it's ended up becoming institutionalized, because these organizations have come in and ended up becoming part of the system, and helping that protection when the allegation comes.
Yeah, it's so complex, and there is, you know, one of my perceptions before I joined Kick It Out was that occasionally, you know, Kick It Out was used by football bodies to hide behind as a bit of a human shield when things went wrong. So it is a great example of it is when a player is racially abused and the player needs some help and support, right? And we would have Troy Townsend, who's, you know, brilliant member of our team, works his socks off, go and provide some support to the players. But, you know, there will be occasions where he's not able to do that, right? And sometimes we'll get given abuse. Like, actually, we got one during my tenure around a player who was on loan from West Brom to Charlton, right? Now, actually, the facts in that matter were we did reach out and the club didn't pass on the message. And we're forced. We can't just go direct to the player. We have to go through the club. But I also have to sort of give people the context, which is with, at that time we were 15 people. We're still only 20 people. Charlton has about 50 times our resources. West Bromwich parent club has about 250 times our resources. And the PFA has 65 million quid in reserves unspent. And all these other organisations, you're their employer. Why are you hiding behind us? That's not our responsibility. That's yours. People conveniently hiding behind us. I'm much more willing to call that stuff out now. You are not going to hide behind me as your human shield. And I see the potential for that in football. I saw the potential for that, as Azeem knows. We're having the conversations about cricket and what we're doing in cricket. I'll be very, very careful going, we're not in cricket yet. What we're doing is exploring whether we could do something in cricket. But already we'll see that there are some people wanting to push us into an avenue of doing this or doing this and saying, no, we're not ready for that. We're not ready for doing that. And also, how do I know that's the right thing? How do I know that your 12-point plan is the right plan? I need to understand the challenges in your sport and the bits that we think where we can add value. And once we do that, then we will go for it. So, but you have to be so careful with these things because they can come up so quickly. But I think we're aware of it. I'm sure sometimes we'll get it wrong. We'll be used that way. But we're pretty alive to it. I mean, I'll give you, there's been a couple of times where people have tried to put gagging clauses in agreements, and I just went, I'd rather not have your money, thank you. If you're going to put that in, I'm not even going to negotiate it. That's all going out. So we won't do that.
We won't say whether Azeem's experienced that himself, but one of the things, Azeem, that you've spoken a lot about, and it comes back to this notion of support and challenges. It does nobody any good if Yorkshire Cricket Club gets shut down. It doesn't do the community any good. It doesn't do the up and coming young players any good from any background. And I think that would be the same with all sports. So this whole notion of support and challenge is all about trying to challenge the governing body or the clubs to do better, because we think having a more equal society is a better society and everything that diversity brings. But at the same time, supporting them on that journey as well. And if that means, calling them out on things, so be it. It has to be done.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, look, from a Yorkshire point of view, obviously the things are going in the right direction now. I mean, the first time ever, I think, as far as I'm aware, Indian international companies got involved from a commercial point of view. So they're moving in the right direction, and it just shows when you've got right leadership and a real will to do the right thing, how people want to support that. And I mean, nothing would make me happier but to see a Yorkshire team that wins trophies, is reflective of its society, and also not just from a playing point of view, the coaching staff, board, throughout the office, everywhere, at every level, but also people that walk past Headingley can feel like that is their club, and they can call that place home, from all backgrounds. So that I mean, Yorkshire are on a sort of positive curve at the minute, but I'm sure they'll get things wrong. I'm sure they will, and hopefully through dialogue can support them when they challenge them, but also support them when they get things wrong, because they are wanting to do it. And I can already see a big difference of opportunities throughout all age groups. So they're on the journey. A lot of people need to sort of get on that journey as well now, but I mean, it does no one any good. And as well, like I said from the offset, when you speak out, more times than not, most people are genuinely just looking to make sure that their experience can help it not happen to someone else.
And I think, with the whole Yorkshire making mistakes or not making mistakes, I think it's also important that if they do make a mistake and they come out and say, look, we've made it, just still support them with that. And that's where we all are with this journey. We've all got prejudices that are inbuilt into us. No, just because of the way society is and what we have been ingrained into, to sort of what's been ingrained into us from what we've watched on TV since we've been growing up. And we all need to acknowledge that and then work through it, no matter what it is. And I think you've again, coming back to yourself, Azeem, have said it in particular, that you've wanted to work with those who've acknowledged their past misdemeanors, let's say, or past aggressions. But there's some people who aren't ready to accept that, and I think that's where we have issues.
Yeah, look, I mean, 2 days after GCMS, one of my own mistakes came up, and something I regret massively. But it just shows that this is very complex. As soon as I saw it, I felt sick to my stomach. Several things. One main one being that actually for 2 years, I'd been saying if I was from the Jewish community, I'd have had way more support, because Jewish people stick together a lot more. And it broke me that I'd made a comment that has hurt people. But I tried to make sure that no excuses, apologize, and not only that, try and find out why I might have actually made them comments. And I've tried to do that from my point of view, and that's all I asked anyone to do. Like I said, it's they clearly never got to know me while I was there, and because it was more actually the way they handled it that took it to the car crash that it did. But I'd still say to people, look, we all make mistakes every day. It doesn't make you a smaller person to accept it. It actually can start your journey back to doing things in the right way.
Definitely.
I think there's an important bit there, sorry, because I just want to pick up on that, because there's some wider pieces elsewhere in cricket and in other sports, right? Because the apology is the beginning. It's not the end, and it's not the totality of contrition, right? Contrition is a doing word, not a saying word. And so prove it with your acts. And I think what Azeem did was prove it with his acts, and the work that you did with Anne Frank Trust, and actually going out and talking to the communities that you impacted. We do a fan education program where people who do commit discriminatory acts, rather than necessarily being banned for life, if they're the kind of character that's amenable to education, because it was done when they were drunk and they didn't mean it and all that, we'll do an education program with them, and it might mean they're suspended for half a season or a season or whatever, and you're able to come back into the game. But they've done something, they've done an act, they've thought about the impacts of their behavior and maybe engage with people who might be on the receiving end of that. So Michael Vaughan apologizing to his mate Dan Walker, look, it's good, it's a good start, but you got interviewed by your mate who you play golf with. So before he's back on TV or using his platform, I want to know, what's he done? What's he done to reach out to people like me who listen to and see those comments? And the same way with Kurt Zuma in football, he's very, very quick. He's apologised and we're going to pay the money. Yeah, but he's been investigated for an offence of violence committed in front of his child, premeditated, seems designed to actually harm his child psychologically because it's his child's pet. It's an act which carries a custodial sentence of up to 5 years, and your punishment of him was the absolute minimum, 2 weeks' wages. You can find them 6 weeks' wages for an outstanding breach. You fined him 2, which is the same for missing training. And the reason why you did it was because you were going for a Champions League spot. And so the money trumps your values, right? So this is what I say. So apology, you have to be really careful on the ecosystem of apologies. People are very good at apologizing without it actually having any meaning or impact. Apologies are the start. We should reach out. We should accept, and I certainly did when Michael Vaughan said that he apologized. I was going, well, we should accept that. But we are interested in, and what did you do next? Yeah. So when he does come back into the public sphere, I will be asking the question. What did you do next? What did you do next?
Yeah, and also, apologies. Once you do apologize, it's not my place when if I made the mistake to decide that whether that's enough or not. It should always be left up to the people that have been hurt. to decide what happens after that. And I mean, from my point of view, I try to do that and continue to try and do it. But this is where it really, you know, these apology, non-apologies, it actually makes things worse. I'd rather have nothing.
You should be asking for forgiveness, not demanding it. And at the moment, it becomes, well, if I do the apology, that's me. I'm entitled to forgiveness. Actually, it's not in your gift. It's not in your gift.
I've got two very quick questions, because I know Azeem, you're going to break your fast for Ramzan soon. Especially when it comes to the topic around race, people are very, very scared still, especially in let's say whiter boardrooms, because they just don't know how to tackle the conversation, because of this whole thing that, you know, to be called racist is just like, you know, being called the scum of the earth. How would you advise organizations to just get past that? Because and that comes back to the apology as well, because if they apologize for institutional racism, that they're scared of saying that we're racist as well. And so how can we help people and support organizations through that?
It's been one of the things that when I've been talking to organizations is it feels like there's this institutional racism and racist. The minute you say them word, everyone just goes, whoa, no, how can we be? No. And it's like a proper, like I said, no, just going to that mentality. And can we take the heat out of the words a little bit? I don't know. It's a real tricky one. But I think, again, for me, I think with all of this, your leader within that, if it's an organization, does dictate what happens a lot, and how they handle these things. And if they straight away go for this risk management strategy, getting lawyers involved and all this, sorry, Sanjay, but it actually complicates stuff. It just, I mean, the word I used when I've spoken to is just dealing with these things as a human first. And I know that's a little bit more difficult with the complexities of an organization, but from my experience, I would say is people just want to be dealt with as a human when they talk about these things, and take them words out of it, just speak to the human could help it sort of deal with it better.
Definitely.
I think just generally dealing with race, it is the most incendiary topic. People don't want to be accused of it. And sometimes maybe it's also a word, because we're so keen on labels now, we bandy things around. You know, if you're a woman and you want to challenge whether someone who's trans has a right to compete in women's sport, you're immediately labelled a TERF, right? And so we want to label people. So we've got to get out of labeling people and out of this sort of debate and into dialogue. And there's a difference between debate and dialogue, because debate is me proving you're wrong and you proving I'm wrong. Dialogue is about listening and about understanding what someone else is saying. So I think, but ultimately on things like this, it's about confidence and conversations and building competence to have those confident conversations. And ultimately that has to come from leaders. That's your responsibility as a leader. More often than not, the big leadership skill, the communication skill required of leaders is listening. And I always say, except when it comes to talking about race, because everyone will be silent because it's so frightening. So your responsibility as a leader is to build your confidence by building your competence to have a sensible conversation and to lead that conversation, because if you don't, no one else will. And so that's what I'm looking for, is confident leadership.
Okay, guys, and just finally, thank you for all your time today, but where would you like to see your respective sports and sports generally in the next 5 years head with this whole topic?
I mean, cricket, from my point of view, I'd love cricket grounds to feel more welcoming. People walking past, as I've said, most cricket grounds, there's large communities, they would walk and they wouldn't feel welcoming, they wouldn't go in. So for me, it's more that the people can go in and actually watch, get involved, and call that club. That club needs to be more than just a cricket club that's there when cricket's on, being able to go into the ground and do some other things. And that organically, I feel like that will then filter into all different roles within the club. And I'd just obviously So I think the England team, as I said, well, the England one-day team is very lucky at the minute with quite good representation, but I'd like there to be more coaches, because I think coaching, that's one thing that will help solve the players sort of a drop off and that we've been seeing, especially from a South Asian point of view. So more people in decision-making positions that are diverse will help move the game forward, in my opinion.
I think just before I move on to Sanjay, I mean, cricket, especially the one-day team, which won the World Cup, was seen as a bit of a beacon, really, of hope for what they did. Especially, I mean, I heard stories of Owen Morgan really going out of his way to make sure there was an inclusive culture there. So not just saying to the lads, I'll go off and play golf when some of them probably don't play golf, you know, just but making everything about that team more inclusive.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that one-day team, everything that they've done over the last 4 or 5 years from a cricketing point of view has been great, but I think it's because of the environment that's been set by the leaders, Trevor Bayliss and Owen Morgan, and speaking to people in that team, they feel valued, and that's really important.
Brilliant. Sanjay?
I mean, we're going to try and get engaged in, I think, in other sports as well. And so, you know, Azeem's hopes for cricket, hopefully we can help to deliver some of those as well. But I think just in football, look, there are so many individual things that we would like to deliver and that I'd like to see, you know. So I'd like us to see, you know, us putting an end to online abuse and discrimination, and we're working on the online safety bill. I'd like us to see more black coaches in the dugout, and I'm focused on black coaches because we haven't got the Asian representation on the pitch. I want to see more South Asian representation on the pitch. I'd like to see both in the women's game because we have neither black nor South Asian representation. I'd like us to see a culture of football that LGBT people feel comfortable and confident to be themselves, that I can walk hand in hand with my wife into a football match. You should be able to walk hand in hand with your partner into a football match. Those are just some of the things, and there are lots of other things. In order to deliver all those things, there's one thing that I think we will need above everything else, which is a cultural thing, which is, can you stay engaged beyond the headlines? Can you stay engaged beyond the news cycle? Because we've had these blips before where people suddenly get engaged because there's a big issue, and then you know, a year later, they're not there. My hope and my optimism is people have been engaged for the last 2 and a bit years. And at the moment, touch wood, don't see any sign of that abating. So we'll know we're in a good place where this is kind of constantly on the agenda. We know these things are not going to change overnight, but all the time there are people there engaging the agenda and how we're gradually changing things. That's progress. You know, the really major changes in life don't really happen overnight. They happen very, 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 very slowly. When we eliminate diseases, they go very, 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 very slowly. And it should be something that we look back in the rearview mirror and go, oh, we're no longer talking about the first Asian player to play for Man United or Tottenham, wherever, because it's normal.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, both of you, thank you so much for your time today. I think it's been really insightful and a lot for people to take away. We will be sharing a recording of this for people to listen back to and use as an education point as well. And we have got another Hockey All In webinar in the next couple of weeks where we're having Tess Howard come along, and we'll send out more details of that shortly. So thank you, everyone. And Azeem, Sanjay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Cheers, guys.
Cheers.